They didn't ask, they demanded. The envelope was already on the table when I walked into my parents' living room, thick, cream-colored, stamped with a law firm's logo I recognized immediately. My brother sat on the couch, legs crossed, phone in hand, not even pretending to be nervous. My mother stood by the window. My father didn't look up from his chair. That alone told me everything. "You're late," my mother said without turning around. "I came straight from work," I replied, setting my bag down slowly. "What's this about?" My father finally lifted his eyes. "Sit." I didn't. "I'll stand," I said. "Say it." My brother smirked. "Still dramatic." I ignored him. My mother sighed, like I was exhausting her on purpose. "We've had a family discussion." Of course they had. "And we've decided," she continued, "that the inheritance needs to stay in the family." I laughed once, short, disbelieving. "It is in the family." My father cleared his throat. "You know what she means." I did. 3 weeks earlier, our aunt, my mother's older sister, had passed away unexpectedly. No children, no spouse. And for reasons no one had bothered to explain to me until after the funeral, she'd left the bulk of her estate to me. $2.8 million. Cash, property, investments. Not because I was the oldest, not because I was the closest geographically, but because I was the one who'd called her every Sunday for the last 10 years, the one who'd visited when she was sick, the one who'd never asked her for anything. My family found out the amount 2 days later. This meeting was the result. My brother leaned forward now, folding his hands. "Look, this doesn't have to be difficult." I raised an eyebrow. "Funny way of starting, then." He smiled tightly. "You don't need that kind of money." There it was. I waited. "You're doing fine," he continued. "You've got a job, an apartment, no kids, no responsibilities." My mother finally turned around. "Your brother has a family," she said sharply. "A mortgage, college funds to think about." I crossed my arms. "So?" "So," my father said, voice heavy, "you should sign it over to him." The words landed hard, not because I hadn't expected them, because of how easily they said them. "I'm not signing anything," I replied calmly. My mother's eyes flashed. "Don't be selfish." Selfish? For accepting something that was legally and intentionally left to me. My brother sighed, like I was a problem he'd hoped to solve quickly. "We already spoke to a lawyer." He slid the envelope toward me. Inside were documents, prepared, typed, waiting. A transfer agreement. My name already printed at the bottom. All I had to do was sign. "You planned this," I said quietly. My father nodded. "We're trying to prevent resentment." I almost laughed. "You're creating it," I said. My mother's voice rose. "Do you want to tear this family apart over money?" I looked at her. "You mean the money you're asking me to give up?" My brother leaned back again, confidence returning. "Be realistic. Aunt Clara wasn't thinking clearly at the end." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Don't," I warned. "She was lonely," he continued. "You took advantage of that." That did it. I stepped closer to the table. "I showed up," I said. "You didn't." My father stood. "That's enough." "No, it isn't." My mother pointed at the papers. "You sign that, and this goes away." "And if I don't?" Silence. Heavy. Loaded. My brother answered, "Then you're choosing money over family." I looked at all three of them, the practiced concern, the entitlement, the certainty that I'd fold the way I always had. Something shifted inside me. "I'm choosing myself," I said. My mother scoffed. "You wouldn't last a year without us." That was when the door opened. Not loudly, not dramatically, just decisively. Footsteps crossed the entryway, and a voice I recognized immediately said, "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was a nightmare." Every head in the room snapped toward the door. My boss stood there, suit immaculate, expression unreadable. He looked at me first,
then at the papers on the table, then at my family, and smiled, slowly. "Well," he said, "this is interesting." And in that moment, I knew they had no idea who they were dealing with, and they were about to find out. The room went silent the moment my boss stepped fully inside. Not the awkward silence my family usually filled with forced laughter or passive comments. This one was different. This one waited. My brother was the first to recover. He stood halfway, instinctively straightening his shirt, eyes scanning my boss's suit like he was trying to calculate something. "And you are?" my father asked, forcing a polite tone. My boss didn't answer right away. He closed the door behind him calmly, set his briefcase down by the wall, and took in the room, the envelope on the table, the unsigned documents, my mother's rigid posture, my brother's forced confidence. Then he looked at me. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said. That single word seemed to irritate my mother more than anything else so far. My boss nodded. "Good." Only then did he turn to them. "I'm her employer," he said evenly. "You can call me Daniel." My mother's eyes flicked to me. "You brought your boss to a family meeting?" "I didn't," I replied. "He followed me home." Daniel smiled faintly. "I had a few documents I needed her to review tonight. She mentioned she had a family matter first." My brother laughed nervously. "Well, this is a bit awkward." "Yes," Daniel said. "It is." He pulled out a chair and sat down without asking. That alone shifted the balance of the room. "So," Daniel continued, resting his hands calmly on the table, "you're asking her to sign over an inheritance." My father stiffened. "This is a private family issue." Daniel nodded. "It was, until pressure entered the conversation." My mother scoffed. "We're just advising her." Daniel's gaze didn't waver. "Advising doesn't usually involve pre-drafted legal agreements." My brother cleared his throat. "We're trying to be practical." "Interesting," Daniel said, "because from where I'm sitting, this looks coercive." The word landed hard. Coercive. My mother bristled. "That's an accusation." "No," Daniel replied calmly. "It's an observation." He turned slightly toward me. "Have they threatened you if you refuse?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes." My father slammed his hand lightly on the armrest. "That's not fair." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Then clarify." My father opened his mouth, closed it. My brother jumped in. "She's exaggerating. We're just saying actions have consequences." Daniel smiled thinly. "They always do." He leaned back slightly. "You see, I've worked with her for 6 years." My mother tilted her head dismissively. "And in that time," Daniel continued, "I've watched her handle pressure most people crumble under." He glanced at the papers. "This wouldn't even register as professional stress for her." My brother laughed again, louder this time. "You're talking like she's some executive." Daniel looked at him directly. "She is." That shut him up. My mother blinked. "Excuse me?" Daniel folded his hands. "She's not just an employee, she's a senior partner." The word hit the room like a dropped glass. Partner. My father stared at me. "Is that true?" "Yes," I said quietly. "You never said," my mother began. "You never asked," I replied. My brother scoffed. "That doesn't change anything. Family is family." Daniel nodded. "Correct, which is why this situation concerns me." He turned toward my parents. "Do you know what fiduciary duty is?" My father frowned. "Of course." "Good," Daniel said, "because she has one to herself." Silence. "And," Daniel added, "to her future." My mother's voice sharpened. "Are you threatening us?" "No," Daniel replied. "I'm warning you." My brother leaned forward. "About what?" Daniel picked up the envelope, glanced inside, then set it back down. "Any agreement signed under duress can be challenged," he said calmly, "especially when there's evidence of family pressure." My mother's lips tightened. "There's no evidence." Daniel looked at me.
Would you like to share the messages? I pulled out my phone. I didn't read them. I didn't need to. My mother's face went pale anyway. You wouldn't, she said. I would, I replied. Daniel nodded. And if this escalates, it becomes very public. My brother's confidence cracked just slightly. This is getting out of hand. Yes, because you miscalculated. My father looked tired now, older. What do you want? He asked. Daniel met his eyes. I want this meeting to end. My mother snapped. Not until she signs. Daniel didn't raise his voice. She won't, he said, and something about the certainty in his tone made it final. My brother stood abruptly. You think money makes you untouchable? Daniel smiled faintly. No, it makes her protected. He stood as well. Let's go, he said to me. I picked up my bag. My mother's voice trembled. If you walk out that door... I turned back. I've been walking my whole life. This is just the first time I'm not coming back to apologize. Daniel opened the door. As we stepped into the hallway, my brother shouted after us, You'll regret this! Daniel paused and looked back. Regret, he said calmly, comes from giving in to pressure you know is wrong. Then the door closed. The hallway felt like oxygen. I exhaled for what felt like the first time all evening. You didn't have to do that, I said quietly. Daniel looked at me. Yes, he replied. I did. We walked toward the elevator. Behind us, the family meeting dissolved into something else entirely, and ahead of us, the fight was far from over, because when my family realized intimidation hadn't worked, they tried something much uglier, and that's when things got truly dangerous. They didn't come after me directly at first.
That would have been too obvious, too easy to trace back to the living room where everything had gone wrong. Instead, they went sideways. I noticed it the following Monday morning when I walked into work and my assistant looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, concern mixed with confusion. Everything okay? I asked, setting my bag down. She hesitated. You've had a few calls. What kind of calls? She lowered her voice. Personal ones. That set off a quiet alarm in my chest. From who? She slid a notepad toward me. My father's name was written at the top, then my mother's, then my brother's. 3 missed calls, all within an hour. They didn't leave messages, she added. Of course they didn't. They wanted to rattle me, not communicate. I took a slow breath. Thanks. When she left, I sat down and stared at my computer screen without turning it on. Daniel had warned me, if they can't control you privately, they'll try to control the narrative. By noon, I understood exactly what he meant. A colleague from another department stopped me in the hallway. Hey, she said carefully, can I ask you something? Sure. She glanced around, then leaned in. Someone called HR this morning, anonymous. They said you might be under emotional strain, that you're dealing with family issues that could affect your judgment. There it was, my family's favorite weapon, concern. Weaponized concern. I felt a flicker of anger, but it passed quickly. Did HR talk to you? I asked. She nodded. They asked if I'd noticed anything unusual. And? I said no, she replied, because there hasn't been. I smiled. Thank you. But I knew this was only the opening move. By the end of the day, Daniel called me into his office. He didn't waste time. They contacted HR, he said. I know. They also emailed the board. That landed harder. What did they say? That you're being pressured by family over money, that they're worried you might be acting impulsively. Impulsive. I almost laughed. Daniel leaned back in his chair. They're trying to undermine your credibility. I expected that. Yes, he said, but now it's on record.
I met his gaze. What happens next? He smiled faintly. Now we shut it down. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were printed emails, call logs, messages. All documented, he said. Time-stamped, patterned, clear. My family hadn't just contacted HR. They'd contacted people, former coworkers, distant professional acquaintances. One even tried to reach a client through a mutual connection, all under the guise of concern. Daniel tapped the folder. This isn't family drama anymore. No, I said, it's harassment. Yes, he replied, and intimidation. The words felt heavy, but accurate. That evening, my mother finally left a voicemail. Her voice was soft, trembling, carefully emotional. "I don't recognize you anymore," she said. "We're just trying to help. People are worried about you." People. Always plural, always vague. I didn't call back. Instead, I forwarded the voicemail to Daniel and my attorney. The next morning, my brother escalated. He showed up at my apartment, unannounced. I opened the door and felt my stomach drop. He stood there with that familiar expression, hurt layered over entitlement. "We need to talk," he said. "Not here," I replied. "You can't keep running away." "I'm not running," I said calmly. "I'm setting boundaries." He scoffed. "You think your boss can protect you from us?" I stepped back, keeping the doorframe between us. "Leave. You owe me," he snapped. "I owe you nothing," I replied. His voice dropped. "You're going to lose everything if you keep this up." That was the moment. Not dramatic, not loud, but clear. "Get away from my door," I said. He hesitated, then smiled thinly. "Fine, we'll do this another way." He walked off. I locked the door and leaned against it, heart pounding, not with fear, but with certainty. They were crossing lines now. That night, Daniel called again. "They contacted the executor," he said. "What did they say?" "That they believe you manipulated your aunt," he replied, "that you isolated her, that the will should be reviewed." I closed my eyes. "They're accusing me of abuse," I said.
"Yes," Daniel replied, "which is serious." Silence stretched between us. Then he said something I hadn't expected. "They don't know who your aunt was to me." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Daniel exhaled slowly. "Clara was my mentor years ago." I straightened. "She helped me when I was starting out," he continued, quietly. "No credit, no expectations." My chest tightened. "She spoke about you often," he said, proudly. I swallowed. "She never mentioned that." "She didn't like to name her influence," he replied. "She preferred to watch from a distance." I smiled sadly. "That sounds like her." Daniel's voice hardened. "Which means I know exactly why she left you that inheritance." A pause. "And I won't let anyone rewrite that." The next move came swiftly. My attorney sent a formal cease and desist letter to my family. Clear, precise, unemotional. It outlined harassment, defamation, and interference with employment. It demanded immediate cessation. The reaction was explosive. My mother called crying. My father sent a furious email. My brother threatened legal action. And then silence for 3 days. No calls, no messages, no intermediaries. I allowed myself to breathe. But deep down, I knew better. Because people who feel entitled to what's yours don't stop when told no. They stop when they're forced to. And my family still believed they could force me. They just hadn't realized yet. They were about to lose far more than an inheritance. And when that realization hit, it would change everything. The silence didn't last. It never does when people are used to being obeyed. On the 4th morning after the cease and desist letter went out, my phone buzzed with a notification I hadn't expected. A calendar invite. From my father. Title: Family Resolution Meeting. Location: a conference room at a downtown law office. Attendees: my parents, my brother, their attorney. No greeting, no apology, just an assumption.
I forwarded it to my attorney with a single line, "They're escalating." My attorney replied within minutes, "Good, now everything is documented."
That should have comforted me. Instead, my stomach tightened because I knew my family, and when they felt cornered, they didn't retreat, they performed. The meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon. I almost didn't go, but Daniel said something that stuck. "If you don't show up," he said, "they'll tell themselves you're afraid. If you do, they'll expose themselves." So I went, not alone. The conference room was glass-walled and cold, with a long table and a city view that felt deliberately impersonal. My parents sat together on one side, my brother beside them, their attorney at the head of the table. When I walked in with my attorney, conversation stopped mid-sentence. My mother's eyes flicked over me, sharp and assessing. My father's jaw was set. My brother didn't look at me at all. We sat. The attorney cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "We're here to resolve concerns regarding the estate of Clara Whitman." Resolve. That word again. My father spoke first. "We believe my daughter is being influenced." I didn't react. "Influenced by whom?" my attorney asked calmly. My mother leaned forward. "Her boss. He has too much involvement." Daniel wasn't there, deliberately, but his presence still filled the room. My attorney nodded. "You're alleging undue influence?" "Yes," my brother said sharply. "She was never close to Aunt Clara like she claims." I met his eyes for the first time. "You don't get to define closeness," I said quietly. Their attorney raised a hand. "Let's keep this professional." "Then stop lying," I replied. My mother gasped. "How dare you?" My attorney interjected smoothly. "Please provide evidence supporting your claims." Silence. My father cleared his throat. "She isolated Clara." "Dates?" my attorney asked. "Well, specifics," my attorney pressed. My brother leaned back, irritated. "Everyone knows Clara was vulnerable." "That's not evidence," my attorney replied. The room grew tense. Then my mother played her card. "She promised us," she said softly. "Clara promised the inheritance would be shared." My attorney tilted her head. "Do you have that in writing?" "No," my mother admitted, "but family promises matter." I felt something inside me finally break, not in anger, but in clarity. My aunt kept her promises. She just didn't make them to you. That landed like a slap. My brother slammed his hand on the table. "You think you're better than us now?"
"No," I replied. "I think you're showing exactly who you are." The attorney cleared his throat. Again. "We're not getting anywhere." My attorney nodded. "Then let's move to consequences." Their attorney frowned. "Excuse me?" My attorney slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of the harassment reports, the HR complaints, the board emails, the executor correspondence, time-stamped, organized, unavoidable. "This," my attorney said, "constitutes interference with employment and defamation." My father's face drained of color. My mother whispered, "What is this?" "The cost of escalation," my attorney replied. My brother scoffed. "You think this scares us?" "No," my attorney said. "I think this informs you." She continued calmly. "If this behavior continues, we will pursue damages." Silence. Then my father spoke, voice low. "You'd sue your own family?" I met his eyes. "You're already trying to destroy me." That was the moment the room shifted. Not because of legal threats, because the truth had finally been said out loud. My mother's composure cracked. "We raised you," she said, tears forming. "We sacrificed for you." "And I'm grateful," I replied, "but gratitude doesn't mean surrender." My brother stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous." Their attorney put a hand out. "Sit down." That surprised him. The attorney turned to my parents. "I strongly advise you to reconsider your approach." My father looked stunned. "You're supposed to be on our side." "I am," the attorney replied carefully, And that's why I'm telling you this is a losing case. My mother stared at him. So what now? My attorney spoke. Now, she said, you stop contacting my client. You stop contacting her employer. You stop questioning the will. And if we don't, my brother snapped. My attorney met his gaze. Then we proceed. The meeting ended shortly after that. No resolution, no reconciliation, just a clear line drawn. Outside the building, I stood on the sidewalk, lungs burning as if I'd been holding my breath for years. Daniel called. How did it go? They're desperate, I said. Yes, that's dangerous, he replied. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. And he was right, because desperation strips away restraint. 3 days later, the story broke. An anonymous tip had been sent to a financial blog. Headline: Corporate executive accused of manipulating elderly relative for millions. My name wasn't in the headline.
But it was in the article. Carefully, strategically. I read it once, then closed my laptop. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This was war, and my family had just crossed a line they could never uncross. Because the next move wouldn't be legal, it would be public. And when the truth came out, they wouldn't just lose the inheritance, they'd lose the story they'd been telling themselves their entire lives, and I wouldn't lift a finger to save them. The article went viral overnight. Not explosive viral, no trending hashtags, no television panels, but the kind that spreads quietly through professional circles, where credibility is currency and reputation is oxygen. LinkedIn shares, private Slack channels, emails that started with, "Have you seen this?" By the time I woke up, Daniel had already called twice. When I answered, his voice was calm. That article, he said, is about to backfire on them. I sat up in bed. How bad is it? For them, he replied, very. I didn't ask him to explain. Daniel never spoke without precision. Do nothing, he added. Today is about letting the truth walk in on its own. By noon, the blog had updated the article, not retracted, expanded. They'd received documentation from someone anonymous. I knew immediately who it was, the executor. Aunt Clara had chosen carefully, down to the last contingency. The update included excerpts of the will, medical evaluations confirming capacity, statements from witnesses, and one devastating paragraph from Clara herself, written months before her death. I am aware that my family may attempt to discredit my decision. This letter exists to confirm that I acted independently, knowingly, and without influence. Any claim otherwise is false. The comment section flipped hard. By the afternoon, the headline changed. New evidence emerges in inheritance dispute. Claims of manipulation unsubstantiated. Daniel called again. The board is issuing a statement, he said. About me? About integrity, he replied. They're standing behind you, publicly. I closed my eyes. That was the moment I finally felt it. Relief. Not the shaky kind, the grounded kind. But my family wasn't done yet. They never are when pride is bleeding out.
My brother called that evening. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. This one wasn't angry. It was pleading. You didn't have to do this, he said. You're destroying everything. I listened once, then deleted it. Because here's the truth he still didn't understand. I hadn't destroyed anything. I'd refused to sacrifice myself to preserve a lie. 2 days later, my parents' attorney withdrew from their case. The reason was vague. Conflict of interest. Translation, we're not touching this anymore. Without legal cover, my family unraveled fast. My father sent an email that read like a resignation. We didn't expect it to go this far.
My mother sent a message that was shorter. "You've humiliated us." I didn't respond to either, because something had finally shifted. Not in them, in me. I no longer felt the urge to explain. The final blow came quietly. The executor filed a public statement, not defensive, final. It confirmed the inheritance, cited the harassment, and announced that any further attempts to interfere would be met with immediate legal action. Case closed. The blog posted a follow-up. This time, it named names. Not mine, theirs. By the end of the week, the story stopped spreading, because there was nothing left to speculate about. The truth had settled, and the truth doesn't need momentum once it's established. A month later, I ran into my brother at a coffee shop near my apartment. No warning, no preparation, just coincidence. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, internally. He saw me and froze. I considered turning around, then decided not to. "Hi," I said. He swallowed. "Hi." We stood there, two people who shared blood but no longer shared a story.
"I didn't think you'd go that far," he said quietly. I met his eyes. "I didn't think you would either." He nodded. "They're not speaking to me much anymore." I waited. "They blame me," he continued, "for pushing too hard." I didn't comment. "You could have shared it," he said finally. I tilted my head. "You never asked to share. You demanded to take." He flinched. "I was afraid," he admitted. "Of what?" "Of being ordinary," he said. That was the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. "I hope you figure that out," I replied, "but not at my expense." He nodded slowly, and for the first time, he didn't argue. He stepped aside. I walked past him, and that was it. No reconciliation montage, no dramatic forgiveness, just clarity. A few weeks later, Daniel and I had dinner. Not business, not strategy, just food and quiet. "You handled it," he said. "I survived it," I replied. He smiled. "That's handling." I thought about Aunt Clara then, about how she'd lived quietly, deliberately, never explaining herself to people who didn't listen anyway. She'd known, she'd always known, that the real inheritance wasn't the money, it was freedom. Freedom from obligation masquerading as love, freedom from guilt dressed up as family, freedom from shrinking to make others comfortable. My family had demanded I sign over $2.8 million because they believed I would always choose peace over self-respect. They were wrong, and when my boss walked in that day, it wasn't power that saved me, it was visibility. Someone finally saw what was happening and refused to pretend it was normal. If you've ever been pressured to give up what's rightfully yours, if you've ever been told you're selfish for protecting yourself, if you've ever been asked to sacrifice your future to preserve someone else's comfort, remember this: love that demands your silence isn't love, and sometimes the moment everything changes is the moment someone walks in and sees the truth clearly and stays.